Good evening, my friends. It appears the world leaders are of one mind. Get anti-vaxxers to vaccinate, but if they don't, make life miserable for them. French President Emmanuel Macron said that he wants to piss off the anti-vaxxers, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even labeled unvaccinated Canadians as extremists who deny science. While Joe Biden said that it is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, blaming the spread of the virus on the unvaccinated. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. Welcome to The Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. A common trait among left-leaning leaders is a penchant for exaggerating or distorting facts to achieve their political ends. President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are in this category. They slander Americans and Canadians who oppose mandatory vaccine mandates, using them as scapegoats. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau even labeled unvaccinated Canadians as extremist, racist, and misogynist who deny science during a talk show in Quebec last September. Despite criticism, they have all intensified and continue to falsely claim that the unvaccinated are responsible for the blockade when they know perfectly well that science has shown that vaccines do not prevent the spread of the latest Omicron variant. Trudeau is doing exactly what Hitler did against the Jews before the Holocaust. He is scapegoating an entire segment of society and inciting hatred. This is the greatest danger we face in the world today, not COVID, but tyranny. It is threatening us all, vaccinated and unvaccinated alike. Commenting on this, Rex Murphy, one of Canada's most popular columnists, said that Trudeau's incitement of anger against people who have decided not to vaccinate is typical of scapegoating. Let's take a look at what he has done. He kept the airport open when this pandemic began. He said it would be racist to ban flights from communist China. First, Trudeau said that masks were ineffective, then mandated face masks. He also warned against large gatherings like marches, but then went to a Black Lives Matter protest. He shut down Parliament and conducted government business from a private residence. And he held an unnecessary election during the pandemic. Trudeau has undermined freedom. He is pushing for Canadians not to be able to go where they want to go, to visit their families, to travel or enter public places without papers. Who will ask if we can tolerate the same man when he is destroying the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for all Canadians through his perverse decrees? Most importantly, if you refuse to be vaccinated, you are the most felonious and despicable person. You are the villain in Justin Trudeau's eyes, the anti-vaxxer. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron went even further. He went so far as to say publicly that those who are not vaccinated, he really hates them and will continue to hate them until the end. He accused those against vaccine mandates of making a huge moral mistake and that they are destroying the solidarity of the country. And in the Philippines, citizens who refuse to receive COVID injections are forced to stay at home under threat of fines and imprisonment. In many countries, they are denied access to public transportation, and some even tried to ban them from grocery stores to buy daily necessities. Under the Biden administration, the national security situation for the U.S. continues to deteriorate. The CCP is challenging its neighbors more and more frequently in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. Iran has resumed perpetuating more terrorist attacks. North Korea has once again begun test firing long-range missiles, and Russia is constantly testing the United States. But this is in large part due to an unjustified and unnecessary vaccine injunction for COVID-19. In response to Biden's COVID vaccine mandate issued by Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in August, the Marines, the elite force in the U.S. military, have been the most affected. Many see the mandates as a political purge that has drained the power of some of America's most patriotic members. So far, 169 Marines have been discharged for refusing to take the experimental vaccine. But thousands more face dismissal after the Pentagon's vaccine mandate for all active duty service members went into effect for the Marine Corps on November 28th. Although the Marines were told they could apply for a religious exemption, it now seems clear that they will never be granted by the administration, as the enforcement of the vaccine mandate seems more important than military readiness and national security. In fact, none of the exemption requests have been approved. Several Marines interviewed by the media were convinced that it was all politically motivated, as the force was being overwhelmed by the vaccine mandate. Some of the officers who have served for more than a decade said that there was something fundamentally wrong with the country's leadership. The army is facing an unconstitutional decree, a very targeted political purge designed to remove some of the best and brightest soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and guardians of Space Force as quickly and as brutally as possible. The same excuses was given in the rejection letters. They were rejected because of concern for military readiness. This is ironic and hypocritical, since discharging Marines creates vacancies and recruiting takes time to fill them. By not conducting personal investigations and rejecting all applications with general assertions of government interest, the Biden administration has failed to address the personal concerns and beliefs of the Marines who submitted religious accommodation. Professor Guo Peizhuan of Ohio State University visited the CCP's Wuhan Institute of Virology in October 2016 to give a presentation on biovirus weapons after previously being awarded the Distinguished Faculty Award by Pfizer. This further revealed the huge interest between the pharmaceutical giant and the Chinese Communist Party's biotechnology agency. It is reported at the presentation, Guo presented his work in the U.S. on coronavirus genetic modification and its derivative RNA nanotechnology, as well as a series of the latest biological applications, such as the establishment of effective and antiviral drug screening protocols, single molecule sensing of viruses, and their sophisticated DNA sequencing. It is well documented that the CCP-controlled Wuhan Institute of Virology is recognized as the birthplace of COVID-19, and that Pfizer stepped up its public relations efforts with governments following the outbreak, ultimately contracting for the majority of vaccinations and sales in the US and worldwide. Meanwhile, thanks to the financial and technical support of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, under Dr. Fauci's leadership, the CCP's viral laboratories have already taken full control of the weaponized application of the killer coronavirus that possibly caused direct human infection. On January 7th, Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev publicly authorized security forces to fire without warning in response to anti-government actions in the country. And CCP leader Xi Jinping hailed the crackdown in Kazakhstan, similar to the June 4th, 1989 massacre in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, as a powerful measure. The CCP called the popular demonstrations in Kazakhstan a color revolution, deliberately staged by foreign forces pointing the fingers at the United States. The CCP supports the Russian-led intervention in Kazakhstan and said that the country is rich in resources and that its future development could influence the CCP's policy in Central Asia. The dictators are sympathetic to each other and do not hide their disregard for democracy and life. While the CCP goes to great lengths to praise the violent repression in Kazakhstan, it has completely double standardized the events on Capitol Hill in the US, using a media strategy to trumpet the collapse of U.S. democracy and confuse and blacken the United States. The communist propaganda machine waged a media war against the United States, attacking it from its failed fight against the pandemic, the refugee crisis, partisan struggles, and racial discrimination. It reinforces white supremacy and promotes racist confrontation and seeks to provoke partisan struggles in the U.S., creating civil unrest and leaving the U.S. to fend for itself. The war between the U.S. and the CCP is in full swing. The Capitol Hill incident was backed by Antifa with the support of the CCP. And the COVID pandemic that has swept the world with the highest mortality rate in the U.S. is a biological war deliberately poisoned by the CCP. Behind the suppression of freedom of expression and manipulation of public opinion by the mainstream left-leaning media in the U.S. is the CCP's corrupting infiltration of the media, political, and scientific circles with money and cyber attacks. The Chinese Communist Party has always brought sort of dictatorship to the heads of Western democracies, using viruses and vaccines to smash their democratic systems, and now it is rattling its sword directly at the beacon of democracy, the United States. The ultimate showdown between dictatorship and democracy between the United States and the CCP has only just begun, and the outcome will inevitably change the current world landscape. President Biden's mandate requiring vaccine for businesses with 100 or more employees was supposed to take effect this Monday, but the Supreme Court heard an emergency motion to block it. Congress has never passed a mandatory vaccination law and indeed would not pass such a law. So where does President Biden get the authority to claim this mandate? Biden's Justice Department said that Congress has given the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, broad authority to protect the safety of workers, including the authority to require workers to be vaccinated. Under the law, OSHA is responsible for ensuring the safety and health of workers by developing innovative methods, technologies, and approaches to address occupational safety and health issues. So Congress authorized the Secretary of Labor to establish mandatory occupational safety and health standards applicable to businesses affecting interstate commerce. This is a broadly worded and vague statute. Biden argues that he is simply carrying out the authority granted to him by the congressional statute. In fact, it would have been better for the administration not to release information that would have weakened the legal arguments for his actions. But unfortunately, shortly after Biden's speech announcing the vaccine mandate, his chief of staff, Ron Klain, retweeted a news anchor's comments that OSHA was doing this vaccine mandate as an emergency workplace safety rule and was the ultimate workaround for the federal government's requirement to get vaccinated. This is clearly a huge mistake. During oral arguments, Chief Justice John Roberts made specific references to this tweet. He asked Biden's lawyers what the administration's workaround meant. If Klain's gloating tweet cost the Biden administration the trust of Justice Roberts, it was a very costly mistake. During oral arguments, Justice Amy Coney Barrett raised doubts as to why the mandate applied to low-risk outdoor occupations like groundskeeping. Justice Neil Gorsuch spoke at length about the major issues of doctrine, which states that the courts should give government agencies less leeway when their decisions may have a broad impact on the economy. Apart from the three liberal judges, there were few defenders of the vaccine injunction. The case hinged on whether the Biden administration was implementing a federal law passed by Congress or acting unconstitutionally on its own. By describing its policy as a workaround, the Biden administration is cutting its own throat. The Democrats are at their wits' end trying to figure out how to win big in the coming midterm elections and can only hope to change the rules of the game to help them get there. The grandstanding rhetoric and completely flimsy justification cannot hide the intention of the reform, which is to allow free cheating in order to steal elections. Their goal of reforming the electoral system is very different from that of normal democratic elections. They seek to flood the system with illegal votes in order to cheat. In this way, they can steal victories that voters would otherwise reject. But patriots have a different goal. We want elections to be safe and fair. And the Democrats complain that the current electoral system will make voting more difficult. The assertions they make to explain why voter identity is racist, sexist, and causes climate change are kind of hilarious. If there was a free press rather than a regime press, Democrats might be asked the obvious question, which is, why do you think minorities are too stupid to get IDs? Or they might be asked, why is it so hard to get citizens to get ID to vote, but not hard to mandate them to get shots and carry proof to sit in a restaurant and eat a Whopper at Burger King? In a recent poll, 74% of Americans supported the need for voter ID. Recognizing the importance of election security, Patriot Voter Reform has come up with Freedom to Vote Reform Program. Here it is. Photo voter ID is required to register and vote, vote on election day, vote in person. If you're deployed in the military, you can cast an absentee vote. Everyone else has to be there in person. Only absentee ballots that arrive before 5 p.m. on election day will be counted. There is no ballot harvesting. There are only paper ballots. We expect an audible trial. Ballots not counted within 12 hours of the polling station closing may not be counted. We no longer use dumps and found ballots. Every ballot has to be counted publicly with lots of observers, full transparency. Large urban centers must report ballots first. This makes it difficult for Democratic polling stations to know how many ballots to look for. No change to election laws or procedures for 180 days after the election. This gives us time to litigate against fraud. The election system does need reform, but not for the Democrats' free-for-all cheating reform, because it's too easy to cheat. Okay, I have one last thing I must talk with all of you about. It's one of the most difficult announcements I have ever had to make. As some of you may have noticed, the Eye Opener show subscribers have been frozen at 220,000K. And what's even more peculiar about this is that we hit 200K subscribers in our first month of operation. Also, after Joe Biden became president, we began to experience a consistent decline in our viewership. This decline has drastically affected the amount of ad revenue share we receive from YouTube. As a conservative and traditional news channel that does not follow the mainstream media narrative, we have suspected for a while now that we have been shadow banned. Though YouTube didn't shut us down or demonetize us, they chose to just squeeze us financially into submission. After a long discussion with the team over the holidays, we came to the decision that we have no choice but to end the Eye Opener indefinitely. Now, we will have one last show this Friday, and I will go into greater detail as to what this exactly means to the future of our relationship. Over the past year, this show has become a meaningful part of my everyday life, and I suspect some of you feel the same. So Friday will be our last show, and if you love this show as much as I do, and you want to stay in touch with me, there are two things I want you to do. Number one, go into the description and click the link and sign up for the newsletter. That way, I will have your email. And number two, sign up to my personal Telegram channel called Truth and Integrity with Michael Lewis. The link will also be in the description. So once again, this is important. I really want all of you to please give me your email address and join my new personal Telegram channel, Truth and Integrity with Michael Lewis, so we can continue our friendship for many years to come. I realize this is extremely abrupt, so please forgive me, friends. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment, and I promise to answer every one of them. I love and appreciate all of you, and I hope everyone will join me for a final farewell and live chat this Friday at 9 p.m. Salute, my friends.